Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Steve White, and my podcast today features a tribute to the great Frankie Beverly. But not just who I want to talk about, the great Frankie Beverly, but what I really want to talk about is why Black people love Frankie Beverly so much. See, but before I even talk about that, here's the first thing I want to say. I want to say to everyone that's listening, everybody that loves Frankie Beverly, and I say that in the present tense, not in the past tense, everyone that loves Frankie Beverly, please understand that Frankie Beverly is not dead. Frankie Beverly did not die because spirit lives. So what has happened is Frankie Beverly has passed on. Oftentimes, we'll say, well, when someone passes away, or sometimes people will say that person died, but then the next thing you know, they'll say, well, so-and-so passed. And what do you mean by that? You mean that they passed on from this world back to the spirit world, the source of everything. I like to say that the person has transitioned back to the spirit world. And when you transition and you go back to the spirit world, what has been revealed to me is that really that is not death, that is the highest form of life. Because now you live in the spirit world, now your spirit is free. So Frankie didn't die, Frankie simply made his transition. As another brother said to me one time, he had graduated to the spirit world. Again, that's the highest form of life. So I never say that Frankie died. And it's very personal to me because 5 years ago, just a little over 5 years ago, my wife transitioned. I was married, and I'm going to talk about that. I was married for 42 years. Met my wife, or the young lady that would become my wife, met her at the great Florida A&M University FAMU. And she went on to become my wife for 42 years. We were together for 45 years altogether. And when she transitioned, I was very clear to everyone that my wife did not die. My wife is not dead. My wife, her spirit lives. And so the same thing is true today for Frankie. Frankie's spirit lives. So let's even change up the language, because language is important. So we don't want to go around using that language. That's somebody else's language. That's not our language. Our language is that the brother has passed on back to the spirit world. The brother has transitioned back to the spirit world, but he lives. And as long as we remember him, he will never die. As long as we honor him, he will never die. Okay? So that's the first thing. Now I can tell you, I am part of the Maze Praise. My wife and I, we were part of the Maze Praise. We were in love with Frankie Beverly. I was at FAMU during the 70s. And during the 70s, there was so much good music back during that time. I even heard Frankie talk about it one time in an interview. And he talked about all of the great bands that came out in the 70s. Of course, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Ohio Players, and New Birth. And I mean, there was so much music. Roy Ayers with Roy Ayers Ubiquity, and Everybody Loves the Sunshine. It was just music, music, music. I think, that was the era that gave birth to what I think is the best music era. But that's me. But nevertheless, I remember the first time that I heard Frankie on the radio back then, and I think it was the song Look at California. And that song caught my attention. And, during that time, being a college student, we were really into music. First year that I was in the dorm, and then I moved out of the dorm my second year and on, got an apartment. But I remember the first year in the dorm, it's like everybody was in competition, like who had the best music booming out of their dorm room. So music was important to us. And so I was buying music all through college. And so when I heard Frankie, I wanted to get out and buy Frankie. I'd already got into Earth, Wind, and Fire and some of these other groups, Parliament, Funkadelic, and all of that. And so next thing you know, I was buying Frankie, and Frankie was cool. So we started to fall in love with Frankie. And then, of course, later on, to fast forward, Frankie did the Live in New Orleans album. and the video. And of course, that just took everything to a whole nother level. And then, Frankie was just touring like crazy. And then we really, 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 really fell in love because now it just went to a whole nother level. That's why I say I'm a part of that maze craze. My wife was a part of that maze craze. We just went crazy over Frankie. And I remember the first time that we saw Frankie, and I'm in South Florida, in Palm Beach County, Riviera Beach. First time we saw Frankie down in Fort Lauderdale, I think it was Sunrise Musical Theater, I believe. Frankie had just done the live in New Orleans, and he was just riding this high. And Frankie brought that same concert to Fort Lauderdale, and we just went nuts. I mean, there's no other way of expressing it. We just went, as my son would say, just bananas. The show was so good, and it was like, man, we can do this all night long. It was that good. And so from that point, anytime Frankie came anywhere in the vicinity, we were going. My wife and I, we were going to be there. So he was doing Fort Lauderdale, or he would come to the James L. Knight Center in Miami. But wherever he was, we were a part of that maze craze, checking out Frankie. Now, before I really talk about why Black people love Frankie so much, because I really want to dig into that, because this is very important as we honor this brother. But let me tell you about some of my personal stories with Frankie first. Frankie Beverly, I tell people today that Frankie Beverly saved my marriage. And if he didn't save my marriage, he definitely made it better. And so what do I mean about that? Going into the 80s and 90s and on, like I said, Frankie was just touring like crazy, and we were part of that maze craze, listening to Frankie. I bought all of his albums. I remember our son, said that when he was growing up, he was like, I thought that nobody existed musically but Frankie and Stevie and Earthman and Fire, Gil Scott-Heron. I mean, because I was wearing it out. And I raised our son and daughter on the music, on Frankie Beverly, on Earthman and Fire, on Stevie Wonder, on Gil Scott-Heron, all of that music. They just grew up on it. And I remember the first time that we were able to go see them together, which was at the Essence Festival. Our son, our daughter, myself, and my wife. And we have been going to Essence, and then we convinced them to join us at Essence, and we went to Essence Festival, and they saw Frankie for the first time, saw Luther for the first time. Because, for several years at Essence, Luther would open up on the first night of Essence, and Frankie would close it out on the last night. I mean, it didn't get any better than that. You had Luther at the front end and Frankie on the back end, and it was sweet. It was sweet. But Frankie, like I said, the reason why I say he literally saved my marriage and definitely made it better is that my wife was in nursing, became a registered nurse. Heads up a big shout out to the nursing school at Florida A&M. Became a registered nurse. And one of the things that would happen when she went into nursing, and I remember her working at a rehab center. And so later in life, this rehab center, they shifted to the 12-hour shifts. And I know that there are people listening who know all about working those 12-hour shifts. They shifted to these 12-hour shifts. But what would happen is sometimes is that if you were one of the nurses there on duty, so now you're doing your 12-hour shift. You get down to about, you've done 10 hours, you got 2 hours to go before you go home, an hour to go maybe even before you go home. And all of a sudden, a new patient would be admitted to the rehab center. Well, when that new patient is admitted, what comes with that is a lot of paperwork. And so now you get, and because you're the nurse on duty, you get bogged down with having to handle all the paperwork. So when your 12-hour shift is over, if you're in the midst of that paperwork, you've got to keep going. You can't pass it on to the nurse that comes on after you. You've got to finish it because you were in the midst of that admission. And so that would happen every now and then, not a lot, but every now and then that would happen. My wife would let me know, we just got an admission. I'm going to be here maybe for another hour or two. And she's already been doing 12 hours. So, you know, you tired now. And she's cranky, getting cranky. And I know she's getting cranky. And I know that when she comes home, she's not going to be in the best of moods. So what I would do, she would come home or just about, you know, sometimes she'd give me a heads up, hey, I'm leaving now. I know she's going to be home in 10 minutes, 15 minutes or whatever. When she walked in the door, I'd have Frankie play. And because I had three options when that happened, right? And when she walked in the door after doing now instead of 12 hours, but now may have turned into 14 hours, I knew when she walked in that, you know, she's going to be cranky, or pardon my language, she's just going to be pissed, be tired and hungry or whatever, you know. So you come in and no matter what you say, it's going to be the wrong thing to say. And y'all know what I'm talking about. So she'd come in. I had three options. Like I said, one was the timing, so that when she was coming home, I would leave. Okay, that's the truth. So that was one option. The other option was to come into my little home office and close the door. Third option that I had, of course, was when she walked in, Frankie was playing. And it was, you know, it's hard to just really stay upset, man, when you walk in the door and Frankie is booming on the box. So that was one thing. And I don't think I ever told her that that was the design tactic that I used to just kind of smooth her out, knowing how much she loved Frankie, to just have Frankie playing when she walked in the door. The other thing, and the reason why I say that it helped my marriage, is because whenever she or I would hear that Frankie was coming to town, like I said, Miami or Fort Lauderdale or anywhere nearby that we could get to him, we would go. And it was just a question of who's going to get the tickets and how soon are you going to get those tickets, because we're going. So we would get tickets to go see Frankie, gave us something to be excited about, look forward to going to see Frankie. And then, of course, the Essence Music Festival came on the scene, and we started going to Essence every year, driving to New Orleans from South Florida. And driving to New Orleans, going to the Essence Festival, I don't like to drive, but that drive, it almost energized you in a sense, because you knew that once you hit the Essence Festival, it was going to be so sweet, it was going to be so much fun. And so seeing, like I said, seeing Luther and Frankie and everybody else that we've seen at the Essence Festival, that was sweet. So that just really, that was something that we had in common that we could look forward to, and it just made life sweeter for us, even as a couple, just to be checking out Frankie every chance we had, playing him in the house and going to the concert every time he was close enough that we could get to him. And if he wasn't close enough, we were driving to New Orleans. And then our children, our son and daughter, they went to college in Atlanta, and then they made Atlanta home. And later on in life, we were able to check him out at Chastain Park in Atlanta, for all you all in Atlanta that know what I'm talking about. So we were just part of the maze grade. So now that Frankie has transitioned, my wife transitioned 5 years ago, they're in that spirit realm, and it's all positive energy still. Now, why do Black people love Frankie so much? First thing is that, you know, Frankie, well, let me back it and put it this way. Frankie was sent to us. He was sent to us. He was sent to our people. Frankie, you know, I believe, and I've heard Frankie talk about this a little bit too, but I believe that when you come into this world, you have a divine assignment that comes from God. That is your purpose for being here. I used to say that people had a calling on you. So it was like, but to me, it was almost like, okay, after you came into the world, then you were called to do something. But I believe from the very beginning, when sperm meets egg and you are conceived, at the very beginning, you have a divine assignment that has been given to you. You have a purpose, okay? You have a purpose for living. And God, in his divine wisdom, gives us the gifts and the tools that we need, the talents that we need in order to fulfill our divine purpose. Because we have an assignment, we have a purpose in life. And Frankie came to us with an assignment, with a purpose. And he understood his purpose and he embraced it. And he never let it go. He understood his divine assignment. He was, and I made some notes here even that I want to refer to because there's just so much I want to make sure that I include in this short time with you. But Frankie was on a divine assignment, sent here to bring a message of love, to teach us, because he was a teacher, an educator, if you will, in the purest sense. And music was simply the tool that he used to share that divine wisdom with us, that he shared with us. But Frankie was on the assignment. He had a divine purpose in life and he embraced it. He knew that he had been sent here with the gift of music, not just to sing songs, but to write songs. The rhythms that he was able to come up with, everything, that was his gift. And Frankie embraced it and he never abandoned it. So when Frankie announced that he was retiring from music, I remember telling someone then, I wouldn't be surprised, or I wouldn't be surprised if Frankie transitioned. Now, I didn't know anything about his health, and I still don't know because I'm really not that concerned about, what were the health issues. Like some people on YouTube now talking about, what he quote unquote died from. I don't care. Because first of all, like I said, he didn't die, he simply transitioned. But I knew that once Frankie retired and he would no longer be performing, I knew that inherently or innately, he would understand that his assignment had been complete. He had completed his assignment because being on stage, performing for us, singing to us, using his gift to teach us and to inspire us and to motivate us, which is what he did with his music, that assignment had been complete. So when he was no longer able to sing because his voice had gotten weaker, and he had made the agreement to no longer perform, then he knew that his assignment had been completed. Because I remember years ago, there was an interview, an article written in Ebony magazine, probably one of the last great articles Ebony magazine featured, where they interviewed Frankie Beverly. They did a whole beautiful story on Frankie Beverly, on Maze, featuring Frankie Beverly. And they called them Black America's favorite band. But I remember in that interview, Frankie talked about how much he loved performing, that he could simply die on stage, is what he said, because that's how much he loved it. And so when he retired and he could no longer perform, I really think that he understood that his mission had been complete. He maybe never verbalized that to anybody, didn't talk about it, but I think deep down inside, he knew that his mission had been completed. He accepted his assignment and he fulfilled his assignment. So now what was Frankie? Why did Black people, and why do Black people love Frankie so much? Because when we saw Frankie Beverly, when we listened to his music or we saw him in concert, especially when we saw him in concert, it was such a holistic experience seeing Frankie. A holistic experience is where you're touching the mind, the body, and the spirit. And Frankie music, seeing Frankie touched our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. And Black people, we are a spiritual people. And Frankie connected with our spirit. We are a rhythmic people. We are a people who creates rhythm. We are people who dance. And when we were going to a Frankie concert, we were singing and dancing while our spirits were being touched and enhanced with the beauty, not just of the rhythms, but of the words to the song. Frankie's songs were some of the deepest messages that you'll ever get in music, but he delivered it in such a simple way that all of us could receive. because the great teachers, educators, the great educators always, when they are doing the divine work of God, they are able to make it so plain that, as they would say, even a child could understand it. So Frankie's stuff was deep, or as they say, it was simple yet complex. So Frankie was giving us these deep, deep messages, these songs of love that was teaching us how to grow, teaching us how to deal with the challenges of life. And yet we were singing and dancing at the same time. He was challenging our ability to reason and to think. He was touching our hearts, our spirit, and we were dancing and singing all at the same time. That's a holistic experience. And that's the way life is supposed to be. You're not supposed to deal with just one aspect of who you are. You're supposed to deal with the whole person. And Frankie dealt with the whole person. He touched every aspect of our lives. And so when we saw Frankie, every fiber of our being was being touched and moved in a positive way. And Frankie was teaching us. But he was teaching us in a way that we could receive it, because again, that's what the great teachers do. So Frankie was telling us what? He'd come on stage and he'd hit running away. And he was telling us what? You can't run away, right? Because in life, that's what a lot of us do. Problems confront us. We want to run from them. We don't want to deal with them. We get worn out by them, so we try to run. Frankie said, don't run away. You just need some rejuvenation. Okay, but you cannot run from your problem. So he was teaching us, stand firm, stand strong, and deal with it, but don't run away. But get that rejuvenation that'll get you fired up and re-energized so that you can move forward and deal with the challenges of life, but don't run away from it. And then Frankie came back and he told us really one of the deepest messages that you can give, okay? The golden time of David. He sung about that. Now, if you saw Frankie in concert like I did all those years, especially those, last 20 years or whatever, when he had Jubu killing the guitar solo on the golden time of David, there were two profound messages in there that touched our hearts and touched our minds and touched our bodies. So Frankie told us what in Golden Time of Day. He said that time of the day when the sun is going down, and I'm just talking straight off the top of my head, when that sun is going down and it takes a lovely form, and he talked about the beauty of it, the golden time of day. And people love the sunset. They love that golden time of day. It's such a peaceful time of day when you just sit back and just enjoy the sun setting and everything, as Frankie said, it's taking a lovely form, and it's that golden time of day. So Frankie told us how to appreciate the golden time of day. But then he came back after Jubu in concert had killed the guitar solo. The second part of that song really was the deepest part of that song, right? Because then Frankie came back and said, there's that time in your life when you find who you are. When you find out who you are, because that's what life is about. When you find out who you are, when you can answer the questions, who am I and why am I here? And Frankie was telling you that when you find that is the golden time of the day. And that's even at a higher level than even the physical of you seeing the sun setting and the beauty of that. But when you find out who you are, when you find all the love you need is right inside of you. Why? Because all growth starts from the inside out. All the love you need is in you. Let it emanate and let it come forth from you. Because when you give love, you receive love, right? So Frankie said that everything you need, it starts with our personal growth and our personal development. That's what he was telling us. When that becomes the golden time of your day, when you find out who you are, and when you find that all the love you need is right inside of you. And so Frankie was giving us that, and we were singing it, because when you're singing it, your subconscious is hearing it. That's the deepness of what how Frankie was teaching us. Because what do what are we taught often, right? That you come up with these mantras or these affirmations and things like that, and they tell you to put it on the wall, put it on your mirror, wherever it may be, and read it and repeat it, because as you repeat it, as you read it and repeat it, the subconscious starts to accept it, because the subconscious accepts whatever you give it, positive or negative energy, it's going to accept it. So when we was at a Frankie concert or listening to the song, but definitely at the concerts, and we singing these songs with him, our subconscious is accepting it. Our subconscious is receiving it. We were being told that when you find all the love you need, that's going to be your golden time of the day. When you look deep inside of yourself, that's going to be the golden time of the day. Then Frankie came back and he sung to us about happy feelings. Now, and he told us to take those happy feelings and do what? Spread it all over the room. Happy feelings. Because we live in a world that bombards us with negativity, negative energy. And many of us, we have bought into it. So now we spew forth from our own mouths nothing but negative energy, negative comments, negative thoughts coming forth. We look at life and everything is going wrong. Something is wrong with this and something is wrong with that. And we just complain and complain and complain and complain. And Frankie said, grab hold of those happy feelings and spread them all over the world. And when we started singing that, that becomes immersed into our very spirit. I'm telling you this, I'm not this. So why did we love him so much? Because he was connecting with us and we were connecting with him. That's why he said that we are one. We're the same people. We are one. Now, you can take it or let it alone, but Frankie was talking first and foremost to his own people, because he knew that that was his audience. I remember Frankie saying one time in concert that he was able to stand up on stage, and I want you to really listen to this. So Frankie stood on stage and Frankie said, Black people take care of me. Black people take care of me. Frankie said, the crossover, yeah, I would love to have, but not if I got to change what I do. I'm not changing the music for the crossover. So what Frankie did was Frankie stood still, really. And Frankie said to white audiences, y'all can cross over to me, because I'm not changing what I do. This is the music I make. And if y'all want to get some of it, come on and get it. But if I got to change my music, it's not going to happen. And you know what? I don't have to change my music. Why? Because Black people take care of me. And you know how many Black artists today could even get on the stage and say that, because they are so concerned about crossover, so concerned about the white audiences, that they water down their music, they co-opt their music, they co-opt their whole soul, they sell their souls, all wanting to get the crossover, the crossover. So much music don't even have soul in it anymore. And Frankie said, not compromising the music. And the thing about it, if you go, for instance, like on YouTube, and you look at some of Frankie's old concerts over in Europe, when he was in England and Germany and some of these other places, where the auditoriums was full of white folks singing to his music. But even when you saw Frankie in concert, when he was over in Europe, it was Frankie Beverly. He didn't change anything. He didn't change the way that he dressed. He didn't change the songs that he sung. He didn't change the way that he sung them. It was Frankie Beverly. So they embraced Frankie. Frankie didn't change who he was to be embraced by somebody else, because why? Black people took care of maids. But more importantly, Frankie knew that he had a divine assignment, and he could not, listen to me, he could not co-opt his music, because he knew that he was answering to a higher power, that he had been sent here to share that music, and he did not have the right, nor did he have permission to change his music, that he had to sing these songs of love that he had been ordained to sing. There was no compromise. There was no option. So Frankie was feeding us all the time through his music. Music was just the tool that he used to feed our minds, our spirits. It was a holistic experience. And we loved him because we are a holistic people. And so we could connect with our brother. You understand? This is why we loved him. And we knew that he belonged to us, that he was not just passing through us to get to the crossover. He belonged to us. He sung to us. He talked to us because he did not have to compromise. So Frankie told us, spread those happy feelings. Frankie told us, hey, the same things you want, I want it too. Even the song, what is it? After the Morning After. Powerful, powerful song, because Frankie was like, look, I know we all can get caught up in the emotions, right? Especially in that male-female relationship, but it was like, hey, let's put the brakes on this thing and think about it, because what happens after the morning? You know, when some of those good feelings have subsided and now we're starting to think, and it's like you're looking at, hey, what in the world have I done? Why? Because Frankie said, I got somebody and you got somebody too. So let's not act it. Let us check ourselves, because yes, we can become tempted, but let us check ourselves and realize that it is not worth it, because what happens after the morning after. Frankie was teaching you, stop and think about it, brothers and sisters, before you make some foolish mistakes. Stop and think about it. So Frankie was always teaching us. Frankie was always giving us a message in music, but he was doing it in a way that you could not party any harder than you partied when you were at a Frankie Beverly concert, but you didn't have to, but it didn't require filth. He didn't have to sing filthy songs. He sung songs of love. Matter of fact, he has a song, I think it's on the Silky Soul album, one he dedicated to Marvin Gaye, where he said we should be singing our songs of love. And he has a song on there called Songs of Love. I think that's the album that it's on. And that's what he talks about in that song. He said, I know we got our differences. I know we have some things that maybe we don't agree on, and we may have, little confrontations or whatever on that. But when it's all said and done, we should be singing our songs of love. So Frankie taught us to love. He taught us to embrace love. He taught us that we are one, okay? He taught us to spread our happy feelings around the world. He taught us to go deep inside of ourselves and find all that we need is right there inside of you, because so often we are looking outside of ourselves for things that are right there within. Because again, like I said, all growth starts from within. God has already given us everything that we need. And that's the other thing that I was watching an interview recently with Frankie. They were replaying after his transition. And Frankie was saying that everything that he did, one, was based on love. The other thing that he was saying is that we all have been given our gifts and our talents with a purpose, with an assignment, which tells us how those gifts and those talents are to be used. Because see, that's where it gets kind of tricky for a lot of people. Sometimes we may recognize that we have these gifts and talents, but we use them for the wrong reason. You got to understand that not only have you been endowed or blessed with gifts and talents, but the purpose for which those gifts and talents are to be used have also been given to you as well. So you don't have the right to take your gifts and talents and sing foolishness if you are a singer. You don't have the right, if you are a preacher, to get in the pulpit and lie to the people. You don't have the right, if you're an accountant and that's a gift and you're good at that, you don't have the right to cheat the people. If you're a salesman, you don't have the right to cheat the people because you have the gift of gab and you can talk and you can sway people or persuade people. You don't have the right to do that. You understand? Anytime you have been given divine gifts that come from the spirit force that we call God, anytime you have been given those gifts, you don't have the right to violate them. They come with a purpose. for how they are to be used. That is your assignment. And so Frankie embraced it and he gave it to us. And he never, ever, ever compromised. So he was teaching us. He was motivating us, and he was bringing us so much joy. He taught us that joy and pain, same thing. You know, really, it's what he said. Because why? Because you need the sunshine. He said the flowers need the sunshine and the rain to grow. And at the end of the day, what Frank was really telling us is that you are the flower. And you need the sunshine and the rain. You cannot have all of the pleasure without some pain. You can't make strides without some setbacks. So Frankie was telling us, don't get weary, brothers and sisters, because it's all the same. It's one and the same. So the joy and the pain. And once again, what did he have us doing? Singing with him. So that message was being inculcated into our minds and into our spirit, so that we were getting it. And so because of that, we are better people. Collectively, as a people, we are better if we just hold on to what Frankie gave us. And individually, we are better individuals if we just hold on to what Frankie gave us. Frankie was a gift to us. Now, I'm going to conclude. Frankie was a gift to us. And I love seeing all of the tributes and the ceremonies and everything that's taking place all around the country, and I imagine maybe even all around the world, in tribute to Frankie, where we are showing our love and appreciation for this brother. But he knew how much we loved him. And that's why he thanked us. I want to thank you. But that song was so powerful because, when Frankie said, I want to thank you, Frankie was singing to God and to us all at the same time. He was thanking God for giving him what he needed. And he was thanking us for giving him what he needed, because he knew that we were giving to him the love and the positive energy. He knew that God was giving him the love and the positive energy, and that's why he could say once again, we are one. Okay, we are one with God, and we were one with Frankie. And Frankie took the time to say thank you, and we took our time to say thank you back to him. He received the love that we offered him, and we received the love that he offered us. And the other thing about why we love Frankie so much, and why brothers and the sisters love Frankie, is because Frankie he was a man. He was like what somebody would say, a man's man. So Frankie had that sex appeal, if you will, if for lack of a better term, that made the sisters love the brother, right? Because he was so cool, but he had that man's man energy about him that made the brothers love the brother because he was so cool. So Frankie came out on that stage. I don't know how tall he was. He wasn't that tall, but when Frankie came out on that stage, he was the biggest man on the stage, right? And but we all loved him. The brothers loved and respected him, and we could sing and get all excited when that brother came on stage. The sisters loved and respected him, and they could get all excited when the brother came on stage. So he had that, but that was from God. God had given that to him, and he embraced it, and he shared it with the world. So in closing, let me say this. Let us not forget the brother. I know we won't, but let us honor him. Let us live a life that honors a brother who came and for 50, well, really more than 50 years, gave us everything he had, used his gift, and took it to the highest level without compromise. Let us realize that we can do the same thing, that we can elevate higher, that we can vibrate at a higher frequency, and that we can live without compromise. Okay? Frankie knew that he would be taken care of by his own people. But all of the conversation about crossover and everything else, but all the fact that he didn't have record contracts and didn't put out new songs every year, didn't get any awards from the mainstream media and all of that. White folks in America don't even know who he is for the most part. And yet Frankie was as successful as any entertainer ever will be, because God provides. When you submit your will to do his will, God provides. And Frankie understood that, and he was an example of that to us so that we would know the same thing, that if we just simply embraced our gifts and talents and our purpose in life, God will provide. So we're thankful for that, brother. I am. And I know you all, anybody that listens to this, feels the same way. We're thankful for that, brother. I want to say this in closing. I remember one time watching it was a documentary about jazz. And one of the people being interviewed, and they were talking about Louis Armstrong. Well, Louis Armstrong, according to many jazz people who really know jazz, is the greatest jazz trumpet player in history, period. Wynton Marsalis and all of the great trumpet players say that Louis Armstrong is the greatest of all time when it comes to jazz trumpet player. And I remember hearing this man say one time, he said, he said, I never met Louis Armstrong. He said, but I'll be able to tell my children that I lived on the planet at the same time that Louis Armstrong did. I could tell my children that I was here when Louis Armstrong was here, the greatest jazz trumpet player ever in the history of the world. And I am thankful that I existed on this planet at the same time as Frankie Beverly, because Frankie Beverly brought me personally so much joy, made my life richer, gave me something to look forward to, made driving all the way to Louisiana from Florida wasn't even drudgery, knowing that you were going to see Frankie in concert, that he made a difference in our lives, that he gave us all that he had, and he set an example for us that we should look to, that he gave music that you could play in front of your children and not have to worry about the words, that you could play in front of your mothers and your fathers and your grandmothers, that he brought all generations of Black people together, the young, quote unquote, the old, and everybody in between, the brothers and the sisters, brought us all to the concert, entertained us, like they say, at the family reunions and at the picnics and everything. He made life better for us individually and as a people. So I'm thankful that God thought enough of me to put me in the same time and space as Frankie Beverly. I pray that he'll live forever, and I know that he will. And I thank you for taking time to hear me celebrate Frankie Beverly. Now, I want to tell you that you can visit our website called Hattie's Child, HATTIES, Child, all one word, HattiesChild.com. And you'll find a lot more information about the work that I do to enhance the Black community. So check that out. So check out HattiesChild.com. But in the meantime, again, I thank you for taking time to listen, and I thank all of you for honoring our brother. Peace and blessings.